Hello all, very warm welcome. I'm going to today and for the next few videos here, I might not be putting out a video every day, but I'm going to do a roundup of everything I've been talking about in the last, say, year or so in these few videos, just to give you an idea of where this channel will be going. So these videos and the extensive work I've done now into, say, the Titus Flavius connection, early Christianity, the lack of the problems with the manuscript tradition, early Christianity and its lack of historicity, will all be made into something like 5 proper feature-length documentaries. Or I wouldn't say documentaries necessarily, but videos that you can all follow. That will help to really show us all, I think, with ample citation as well through texts at the bottom of the screen and so on, that we really need to look at what Christianity is today, what we are doing, especially with movements now that are trying to get us back to a form of Christianity here with the the Christian right and Christian nationalism that's now becoming quite a powerful force again in politics and in culture and society, and that to really state here that is not necessarily a good way to go. And for 2,000 years Christianity has obviously been with us, and it's not it held back Europe massively. It held back people from the Greco-Roman age here. There are so many things that were all lining up, and the interest and the rigor here that people had for philosophy, for moral law and so on. And though it was not perfect by any stretch, and for the sciences, for natural philosophy, as it was called, was almost got to the point where we could say that Rome would have probably undergone a kind of industrial revolution had not forces and contrivances been put in place, and of course many external forces, the Gothic invasions obviously, the various famines I think had not been in place as well, but that there is something with Christianity here, that there was an anti-scientific stance and a preponderance of influence here on Christianity's primary, objectives, goals, and so on, focusing on Christ, focusing on this millenarian apocalypse to come, which is really quite clear in the apostolic literature and very much in the Gospels themselves and in the epistle writers themselves, and that this stunted the growth of the sciences. And it was only really in the late medieval times, of course, and with the lead to the Renaissance here, specifically in Italy first, then in England, that we see a huge push towards rekindling that desire for philosophy that came with the pre-Christian world, and that helped so much to forge the Renaissance and the interest now in Neoplatonism and so on, in stepping away from dogmatic literalist Christianity, and of course many secret societies were formed in the Middle Ages certainly, but also through this period now of the Renaissance that led to the Enlightenment, where you get bodies like the Royal Society in England here, principally a Freemasonic institution, huge numbers of Masons there in the Royal Society that helped England flourish into the British Empire. So I just wanted to have a little look here at what the survival rate, and I've got a few tables here, of this ancient literature was. And this is the single strongest quantitative evidence here for a problem that arose within Christianity, and a complete dereliction of duty where it came to preserving ancient wisdom and I mean wisdom, okay, and a rigor here, and a preponderance for empirical study that just went away with Christianity, and hugely went away with Christianity, and it didn't, of course, it didn't really rear its head again until 15, 16 and 1700s, where, of course, Christians, and they were Christians, were taking different routes for the first time, getting into a lot of trouble for doing this. Some of them, of course, even getting burnt at the stake, but that was to herald everything that now leads to this time, and all the abundance and technology and the wonders of the modern world. So the standard here in classics gets very damaging when visualized, when we look at how Christianity had an impact on this stuff. So the total known works, we're going to go through this by ancient testimony: works surviving complete, of course, works surviving fragmentary, and works entirely lost. I'm not going to be able to go through them because it would take hours. Where they appear, of course, handbooks of classical philology. So this is where we can get this information from: the introductions of ancient philosophy, editions of Diogenes Laertius, and the Oxford Classical Dictionary are good places to go here for this knowledge. So it's all there. It's all in this scholarship. Scholars like Jonathan Barnes, G.E.R. Lloyd, and Henrik von Staden have been quite useful in compiling a lot of this stuff. So the typical numbers shown here, the disciplines, say Greek philosophy, 2,000 estimated works from this time were extant there in the ancient world. We have surviving 200. Okay, think of the world now and how interesting things would be if we had those copies, if they had been faithfully kept. Of course, Christianity was not interested in holding on to the majority of this stuff. So 10% now is what we have left of these Greek works. Natural sciences, 1,000 or so works. 50, so 1,000 initially in the ancient world. And scores of people and schools that were peddling and helping and building our knowledge of this. Surviving now, so from 1,000, 50%. That's 5% that we have now. And engineering, an unknown number, and surviving a practically zero. Now, of course, we still have a knowledge of the engineering, the feats of engineering, because a lot of that stuff is still here. But there is basically zero left. These tables are usually not moralized, but when graphed chronologically, they show sharp attrition after Christianity, of course, came into the world. A discipline specific survival graphs here, medicine, astronomy, and mechanics, and this will all be visually shown in some of the work that I'll be doing over the next year or so. Medicine here, Galenic corpus, so from Galen, tables listing works known versus works extant, often visualized as bar charts in Galen studies. The result, of course, is 10% survives, mostly preserved for practical utility, not theological innovation, of course. Well, that would make sense. Astronomy tables of astronomical treatises, observational records, model building texts, results after Ptolemy, 150 odd CE, a near flat line in Latin west, in the Latin west until 1200 years. Historians often show this as a timeline with graphs, with gaps, not aligned graphs. So it just fell off a cliff at this time. And this is, I believe, in the East and Western empires. The East scored better because they weren't essentially completely uprooted by various pagan influences and stuff like this. Another set of tables here by century, and we see the histories of philosophy, encyclopedias. This is where they come from. Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy and Cambridge Histories here. They often present lists per century. So this is obviously very elucidating as well, which when counted give you. So this is every century. So 5th century BC, 20 to 30 philosophers approximately in that century. 4th, 30 to 40. 3rd century BC, 25 to 35. And then the 2nd, 20 to 30. First, we see them now going downwards, 15 to 25. And then the 1st century CE, 10 to 20. 2nd, 10 to 15. From the 4th to the 8th century CE, 1, maybe 3. Okay, between 1 and 3. 8th to 11th, 0 to 2. So we get a fairly decent number from the 4th, again, 30 to 40. 3rd century BC, at the height of the Greek civilizations, we get like tens per century who are doing this stuff that we still have. So we see here what's really going on. I think these are the ones that we still have here, that we can count, that there were more. Scientists by field, history and science handbooks. I do want to make sure I've got that right here. So let's just look. So 2,000 in Greek philosophy. This is the estimated works, but I do believe that is true. So we're looking at definitely the works here by philosophers. So these philosophers indeed, approximately, as I said, say just take the 3rd century, 25 to 30. 25 to 35. So there's a lot of just this drop off. So we'll see here the problems, and of course there are lines from Christians, and again these will appear in these documentaries, who are saying the liberal arts have just disappeared. So many people today have a problem, and Christians have a problem with liberalism. They're importing the American term for liberalism as essentially meaning left politics. But they don't realise that the liberal world in Greece and Rome gave Greece and Rome its civilizations, gave them all of these books, gave them their law and society and philosophy. So this again, what these things what you can't see here. So the education curriculum here, in Christian curriculum, was basically grammar, scripture, moral theology, and rhetoric. But the classical curriculum, geometry, astronomy, physics, logic. So far more scientifically aligned here. And you've got the trivium and quadrivium, which are, again, refashioned from the old classical liberal arts. What you do not see, there is no graph in mainstream literature that looks like this, but the scientific progress in Christian Europe from 200, now I picked this 900-year period, from 200 to 1100 or 1100, CE, because the line it's flat in the Christian world. There's near zero, punctuated by essentially silence. Now there are some academics and historians and translators principally who are very bookish, learned men. There are not many at all. You can count them probably on the fingers of two hands. And they were translating some of these great works here of the classical world. But you don't find much at all. What you actually find here is the Islamic contrast does get graphed here, and we do see from the Islamic world, of course 800 to 1200 now, you get a clear upward curve, and people were interested in the sciences and stuff like this. Now it is true that many of those scientists and many of these philosophers and so on, and inventors even, came from the Persian world, They didn't have that much to do with Islam, to be fair. But they were allowed to flourish, and this is true under Islamic rule in places like Baghdad and Andalusia in Spain. And we can't claim anything similar, not until the late the medieval time. Certainly, I would say, in architectural terms, the Normans did a lot for church building and the cathedrals, the beautiful, wonderful, ancient English cathedrals that I love so much. That is true. But where did where did the ingenuity for those buildings come from? Well, it was the Greco-Roman world. And so I just want, I will quickly now go to the this evidence here for some of the things that the Christians were talking about, what they actually said, and I've got to find the right thing here. I wanted to give you the citations. All of these will be cited properly. But I want to just show you some of the really raw, clear evidence from the early church fathers here. So within the first 400 years, basically, of Christianity. This would be Clement of Alexandria as an example. Now, Clement is an interesting fellow, a complex fellow, very happy talking about various streams of gnosis here and open to the more mystical channels there in Christianity, which I really want to get into in my work here. Hopefully I'll be doing this for the rest of my life. I love this study. But he says, "For the wisdom of the world is foolishness with God, and of those who are the wise, the Lord knows their thoughts are vain. Let no man therefore glory on account of preeminence in human thought. For it is written in Jeremiah, let not the wise man glory in his wisdom, but let him that glories glory in this, that he knows and understands that I am the Lord." Okay, but you see there the reticence these men had for actual empirical learning. He says this as well: "Beware lest any man spoil you of faith in Christ by philosophy and vain deceit. For the philosophy which is in accordance with divine tradition establishes and confirms providence, which, being done away with, the governance of the Saviour appears a myth." But again, the emphasis here is on Jesus here, Greek philosophy and its rudiments. So Clement, again, in the epistles, Paul plainly does not disparage philosophy, but deems it unworthy of the man who has attained true knowledge to go back to Greek philosophy anymore, figuratively calling it the rudiments of this world. That's not true, is it, though? These things are very important. If we want to have a firm grounding in all of the beauty that we have through technology now, and we do have a lot of it, of course, much of it has enabled people to live in places they could not live before. It takes us around the world in 24 hours, or, to the other end of the world in that time. It's all good stuff. Well, not all of it, but we did this through putting aside any and all interest in religion and focusing on the empirical world around us. Again, I've got Tertullian here. We can go through some of the Tertullian. "What wisdom is there in this hankering after conjectural speculation? What proof is afforded to us through the useless affectation of a scrupulous curiosity?" In other words, don't be curious. It's not worth anything much. It's not good. Intellectually empty and morally suspect is his line here for inquiry. The physical expectations as in piety here. So in physical phenomena, you remove out of sight the supreme position of the author and consider rather the things that happen than him by whom they happen. Okay? Again, Christianity versus philosophy. Where is there any likeness between the Christian and the philosopher? Between the disciple of Greece and of heaven? Again, just disparaging commentary. After Jesus Christ, we have no need of curiosity. After the gospel, no need of research. You can see why this whole worldview the Greeks had for out there, philosophy as important, philosophy, physique, and stuff like this as the fingerprints here, geometry, physics as the language of God. And it is seen here in mystical traditions as well, even in Christianity in its mystical formula. There is an interest in this, but of course it never ever gets a look in the the Dark Ages here. It's not important to Christians anymore. I think I will do maybe just one Eusebius here. And what are we to expect to learn from philosophers? Okay, they stand in opposition alike to the doctrines of the Hebrews and to the truth itself. Natural philosophers here as opposed to truth. But what is truth? What is truth in Christianity? I've been trying to establish for a long time that we do not have truth in Christianity, and simply taking the gospel truth as the word is eternally problematic. It gets more problematic with all of the current scholarship here, our expanding of knowledge, our ability now to put ancient texts through computational learning, AI and stuff like that, not even AI, just pattern recognition softwares, and to pick apart authors within a single gospel, just like Luke's, just like John's, and realize that there are multiple authors at work, and in the manuscript traditions there are layers of subsequent authorship that are being imported into these gospels, and of course adding whole pericopes, the adulterous woman being one of them in John there. I focused on that recently. John 21, of course you've got the Luke, the birth narrative in Luke, probably not from the original copy of what that gospel was. So this is why I'm doing what I'm doing here, and this is why I'm going to upgrade hopefully the way that I am giving this information in the next year. I think it's important that I reformulate the way that I'm talking about this so it is interesting for people. It will be punchy, it will be much more in a documentary style. I hope that it gets picked up well and that it is interesting and worthwhile for people. I'm going to focus on a bad Jehovah, which is an important one, so we'll just go through them quickly here. And again, as I said, in the next few days I'll just be rounding up, dotting the I's and crossing the T's, as it were, but an anti-literalist series here of arguments for why we can't trust the Gospels first and foremost, and that will be in two parts. Bad Jehovah, the relationship here between the Old Testament and this quite gnarly and evil figure, and even clearly a lesser deity, a deity for Jacob and Moses and so on, not the big guy in the sky, not the real power, the supreme deity, as these Old Testament books actually confirm when you read them. And I'm talking about reading the Torah, so Exodus, Deuteronomy and stuff, Kings. Explain it, these things are expressed Elion as the supreme deity, and then a council, and Jehovah is in the council. He's given as an inheritance, that's the word used, this land of the Hebrews, right? This is not the way even ancient pagans saw Jehovah, as basically a Setian creature from the Egyptian faith and stuff, and gave him a donkey's head, or So celestial Jesus and this mythicism thing. So carrying on here from the work of Richard Carrier, please go and check out some of his newer work. He did one PowerPoint. I'll try and leave it in the comments section. A wonderful thing, about a couple of hours long, just going through Josephus and looking at and giving a proper update on on why we cannot trust Josephus's testimonium. It's all rubbish. The church fathers specifically as well, another one, looking at the church fathers' knowledge here, what they really knew and what they didn't know, and how they were basically acting as propaganda agents, and maybe even Roman propaganda agents, we're not sure. Marcion and the Gospels here, Marcion's connection, the pagan witnesses, and again, like maybe a 1.5 or 2 hour documentary on these witnesses to lay this out for people with all of the incumbent and all of the associated citations, so we know now how to argue this stuff. And of course the new zeitgeist, which is going to help us explain, there's lots of work on this now, the pagan influences on Jesus Christ. And finally, the Titus and Atwill related stuff, a whole documentary compiling the works of Joseph Atwill, of James Valiant, and a few other now things I've been able to find out myself, to consolidate our knowledge on the very real possibility that Titus, in the later part of the formation of Christianity, had a huge impact on Christianity from Rome, very clearly now, and it was separated out. You can separate the Jesus of the Old Testament and the scriptural Jesus and Paul's Jesus and the celestial elements of Jesus here from now the actual story on earth, the biography of someone who doesn't appear to appear at all in the historical record. So I'll leave that there. I'm glad I kept it under half an hour. I didn't want this to last this long, but this is why, again, I think it's important now that we upgrade our understanding of Christianity. Christians are not winning arguments recently. I've looked and studied and really go through this on I wouldn't say daily basis, but on a weekly basis. I'm watching Christians fall flat, fall short, miss the mark with regards to rational, a rational series of strong arguments for anything that relates to Christianity, that we could certainly say, yes, this is good, this is truth. Christians talk about truth all the time, but Christianity is just comes out of a whole world of darkness, and with so many alternative and competing ideas of who Jesus even was. We have to now look at this sincerely and say, what can we salvage and what needs to be thrown away, and how can we salvage some really good stuff that helps us actually connect with the big, those big mysteries. Peace out.